Believe it or not, it is February 1st, 2024. And yes, a lot is still going on in the world. And of course, I've got a guest that'll be talking about some of his experiences with some of the things happening in the world and his own writing and all along those lines. But before we get to him, let me talk about some of the things that are taking place in the world. The EU has agreed to a 50 billion euro fund for Ukraine. So that is something that is going on in the world. And definitely a lot of people are paying to that as that continuing war goes on between Russia and Ukraine and all along those lines. And it looks like Donald Trump has lost a London case against an ex-spy over Kremlin files. So that is something else that we're seeing in the world. And the U.S. is seeing signs that Iran is worried about escalating proxy attacks and amid heightened tensions. So that is something that we are seeing in the world, in the Middle East, and all along those lines. So, of course, we've still got the things going on in Israel, is what's happening in Ukraine. And the U.S. military has targeted 10 Houthi drones in the new Yemen strike. So definitely there's a lot going on in the Middle East. And, of course, if you're looking on the European theater, French farmers are still having their protests. As a matter of fact, angry farmers descended on Brussels to take protests in to the EU summit. So it's not just in France, it's in other parts of Europe as well. So definitely we're seeing a lot of this going as horns were blaring and engines roaring as hundreds of tractors bring the farmers' plight to an EU summit. So definitely we're seeing a lot of things that are going on in that space. And a U.S. warship had a close call with the Houthi missiles in the Red Sea. The U.S. takes a self-defense strike against Houthi projectiles posed to launch at commercial ships in the Red Sea. So, like I said, a lot of things are going on. And then Biden is set to make a push for a demilitarized Palestinian state as part of a new doctrine that he is putting out as well. So definitely that will be some of the conversation going on in the Middle East and all along those lines. And definitely a lot of things are continuing to go on even in other parts of the world, including Myanmar. And the vice is tightening on Myanmar's economy 3 years after a military takeover triggered their civil strife as well. So there's definitely a lot of casualties in that area. As a matter of fact, that war has already taken something like 50,000 plus casualties in that small country and all along those lines. So definitely we're hearing a lot of conversations about war and conflict around the world and all in that space. Definitely people are still reacting to the South Africans' case against Israel, and definitely that is still something that is in the news as well. So definitely a lot of things are taking place on the global and the national front, and I'll get to a couple of the national things as well. By the way, India, we do have some folks connected to India, will release its interim budget this week. So definitely it's not just finances here in the United States, but finances around the world that people are oftentimes paying attention to and seeing how it impacts them as well. And just below us, the El Salvadorian elections, it says, love them or hate them, all eyes are on Bukele. So definitely it does look like that is something that's going on, and he might be heading for a landslide election win, partially based on his crackdown on gangs, because definitely we know gangs have been impacting a number of things in the Latin American part of the world as well. So definitely a lot of things are going on in that world, and we'll continue be following those stories as well. And of course, the weather has always got something going on. So an atmospheric river is set to drench Southern California on it today. And definitely folks will be paying attention to that and some other storms that may be coming that way as well. And a lot of people are paying attention to the new way of doing executions, and a select few witnessed Alabama's nitrogen execution, which was the first time that took place, but there may be some other states that are looking at that as well. And Mark Zuckerberg has apologized to families of exploited children. A lot of people know that he is definitely involved with Facebook and a number of other things. So he apologized to the families of kids that he harmed online as the Senate grilled various tech CEOs. The senators denounced tech companies over child sex abuse online. So definitely that is something that we are seeing as well. And the House has passed a bill to enhance child tax credits and revive key tax breaks for businesses. So that is something else that is in the world as well. And a judge has dismissed Disney's lawsuit against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his allies. So that is something that I know a lot of people were probably paying attention to and seeing what was going on in that way. We've been talking a lot about national politics and all in that way. And, one of the things with national politics is the whole notion of money. Yes, money does run kind of the political landscape. And my guest may have some things to say about that as well. But apparently Trump spent more than $55 million in donor money on legal fees last year, according to his filings and all along that way. And it looks like in terms of fundraising right now, Biden is beating Trump in that part of the world. But Trump's Political Action Committee racked up nearly $29 million in legal bills in 6 months, and he's still facing some other charges as well as some other cases. So definitely be interesting to see how that plays out. And in one of those cases in Georgia, Fani Willis has been subpoenaed for a hearing on misconduct in that whole case that she's got going on. And I think that that's part of the thing that's going on that is involving the special prosecutor that apparently she was in a relationship with. So definitely that's some of the things that are going on in the news. And by the way, it looks like Amelia Earhart's mystery gets a new wrinkle after a plane-shaped object was found by the subs and all along those lines. So there are some explorers that think that they have found Amelia Earhart's missing plane. So we're going to see if this is the case or if it's just one of those fictional stories and all along those lines. But it'll be interesting to see whether this is the actual plane or whether it is just something that people are thinking is the plane. But I'm going to bring in my guest, who is a writer, and he might have some thoughts about some of these things, as well as some of our other people that are on the show as well. So first thing I'm going to do is bring in my special guest, Steve Stratton, and see what he's got to say. Steve, you are a writer, but you've also had some experiences working with the White House and doing a number of other things. So if you'll share a little bit about your background, because I was quite fascinated when I saw you through one of the podcasting services. And I was like, not only is he a mystery writer, but he's got some thoughts around the drug conversation. And so your book even deals with that and all along those lines. And definitely would love to hear your thoughts, because even on this show, we've talked about what's going on in the Southwest and around Texas and other areas where there are borders. And I know your book touches on that. And I said, even seen recently that Nikki Haley was saying that it is perfectly fine if Texas wants to secede, because she was saying how much of a supporter of state rights she is and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear your thoughts just about your own background, and if you'll share a little bit about what you did, because you were there in the White House, in those boardrooms in some cases and all along those lines. And you definitely did some security for some of our folks in leadership as well. I'm not sure that you had to do any for either Biden or Trump, but if you'll just share a little bit about your background. And then, like I said, I've got some other panelists, including one of the founders of the network, that might have some questions for you as well. Of course, I'll have others also, but if you'll share a little bit about your own background.
Well, thank you, Mark, for having me. Yeah, I 73 joined the Army and ended up volunteering my way into working at the White House as a communicator. And so this is back in the day when we used radios and had phones. We didn't have cell phones yet, and the internet wasn't around. So I spent 4.5 years doing that, primarily working in DC and then going on advanced trips with the Secret Service to set up the communications for them on presidential, vice presidential, and even Kissinger visits to different places around the world. So I definitely got some insight to what was going on. It was an easy switch over to the Secret Service. I joke that I didn't become an agent in the Secret Service, but a technical security specialist. So the joke is I didn't have to stand around in a hallway waiting to get shot at, right? Or protecting the man as they go down to the limo. But supported the Secret Service with physical security. So really, after learning technology at the time, radios and microwave and different things like that, communications technologies, then started to learn about improvised explosives, physical alarms, different things like that, and took care of those systems around the White House. And then would also go on those advanced trips once again. And my job during those advanced trips was to make sure that, like, the room, the hotel room and or the meeting room or the conference center was safe for the protectee to come into. And so I would work with bomb teams from military and police, bomb dogs and things like that to make sure from a technical standpoint that the area was safe for the Secret Service agents to bring the protectee in.
Yeah,
So
that makes a lot of sense, and that's definitely some great work. And along those lines, I actually have a cousin that is a member of the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, and he's worked on a couple of details for past presidents, and he actually just recently did one for Kamala Harris, and he's done some sports events for celebrities as well as those politicians. And he does tell me that it can be a challenge working with people like you, but also working just in general with some of those that are supposed to be protected. Now, you were doing this in the 70s, and you mentioned Henry Kissinger, who just recently passed, and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your thoughts about what you're seeing now, because we definitely seem to be living in a very divided country. And I was just wondering your thoughts around even presidential security. And then I definitely want to hear some of your thoughts around what's going on in our drug wars and all along those lines, because I do know that your book touches on that, even though it's a fictional book and all in that way. But definitely,
yeah.
What is some of your own thoughts just as to this divided culture and what's going on in our current political landscape, since you've had
Well, first, I'd like to say that I really appreciate what your family members are doing, and we would go into town like Atlanta and set up communications and or work with the local police and GBI, right? Because we need the locals on the ground, right? We spend a couple of weeks. You're never going to become an expert in 2 to 3 weeks before the president gets there. So you need the locals, their networks and other things like that. So we always appreciated those different agencies that would support us as we came into these environments. It's interesting I'll be 70 this year. And I remember when the term crossed the aisle, right? Mm-hmm. When Senator Kennedy wanted to do something with healthcare, and Senator Byrd from West Virginia would be like, okay, I'll sign up, but I need you to help me do this, this highway project and things like that. And work got done for the citizens of America, for us, right? And I felt like there was a higher percentage of the time that the politicians were working for us, in the United States as citizens and getting things done. And now the politics have become so divisive that sort of my way, the highway kind of idea is out there. You see some crossing the aisle. You see people filter over, from the Democratic side or from the Republican side to vote a certain way, just in their beliefs. And I appreciate that. They're, not only are they voting maybe from their beliefs, but also on the beliefs of what their constituents, right? They're supposed to be servants of us from our districts, from our states, that kind of thing. So it's nice to see when they actually do something that we're interested in instead of something self-serving. I think it's long past time to dial the rhetoric down and get back to the business of America. And, it's tough to see how that is, as they use, especially the internet and social media, to jockey, to position, right? And they're good platforms for that, but they're also platforms for misuse, whether it's Chinese, Iran, Russian misinformation, the Russian, there was a Russian military general, Gerasimov, who penned this document about how Russia could use misinformation, be non-kinetic. So don't have to sling a missile, don't have to shoot a rifle, but still create disharmony and conflict and other things that can cripple the decision making and or put friend against friend kind of idea, right, to create civil strife.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. If you just share a little bit about your book, because like I said, I do know that the book deals a little bit with the notion of the drug war, but also cybersecurity. And I know cybersecurity has been
Yeah,
a big issue as well. So you got Shadow Sanction, which is
right.
the title of the book and everything. And I'm also going to bring in Rick Rosner and Nick Palveda, who's one of the founders of the network, and Lee Newton Rhodes may jump on as well at some point. But I'm just wondering your thoughts both around cybersecurity, because we actually have a show with Rex Lee that deals with cybersecurity and some of the other cyber issues, as well as your thoughts around the drug war, because a lot of people are paying
Yeah.
attention to that. And we actually had a guest yesterday on that we're talking about the fact that there are 4.2 million youth that are homeless and all along those lines. And there from a lot of times that is not a story that is given a lot of credence or a lot of pay in the national news, because a lot of times we're paying attention to what's going on with the border and a number of other things. But I just wanted your take both on cybersecurity and what's happening on the border.
Yeah, sure. Let's start with cybersecurity. So, it's my wife and I often talk about, and this may seem very mercenary, but we're doing enough cybersecurity and have enough hygiene, keeping up with it, changing passwords, doing other things like that, that we intend to not be a target. So let's not make ourselves a target. Let's not, I've got on this shirt from Mexico, because we just recently went with my daughter-in-law and grandson down to Mexico. And, I'm not putting things out on social media with geolocation on it. I am not doing things like very short passwords or, having password as my password. So there's a lot of things from a cybersecurity standpoint that the average Joe can do. The really hurtful thing that happens, and as I see, especially in the retirement community, right, is as us boomers age out, a lot of them don't have a lot of experience with computers in general, cyber, and so it can be daunting to try and keep up with passwords or other things like that. And it really just takes a bit of hygiene, a little bit of doing some things like even while it's not 100% bulletproof, two-factor authentication, other things like that to keep yourself in the clear. For example, not that I'm promoting Google, but you can get a free VPN, right? Mm-hmm. So that your connection to the internet, is more secure. And so, as I see here in the chat, our children and grandchildren are way more tech savvy than a lot of people, right? Because they're growing up with it right away. And but it's really all about getting them, preventing the cyber criminal from wanting to spend time on you, because it costs them money to do cybercrime. And so therefore, and even if up at the corporate level, we think this way, it's like, we're going to do enough, we're going to make it hard enough for them that they're going to look somewhere else. So you can do that as just an individual by protecting yourself, using longer passwords. I often create long passwords, and then I forget them. And so I use password reset a lot, but I'm able to keep strong passwords, and I don't have any ego about can't remember. I just laugh and okay, let's reset the password. So I think it's important across the board. It doesn't matter what your age is, whether you're on social media or doing something with your bank or with your retirement funds and things like that, to spend a few minutes. And if you don't know, there's somebody around in your community who does and can help you improve your cybersecurity posture such that bad folks are going to look elsewhere. Yeah. The other thing I would say real quick is phishing is a real problem. This new movie, Beekeeper, it starts off with a phishing hacking attempt that actually works. And it's sort of the jump off for the story. And it's so true with older folks. And especially like ransomware. I've had several times I've had my screen come up and pop up because I went to the wrong site, and it'll have something about your system's about to be locked and blah, blah, blah. And I just sort of laugh and turn off my computer and reboot to get out of it, get away from it. So anyway, I'll stop.
No doubt. And like I said, we've got Nick with us, who's one of the founders of the network, along with Rick. And I just see that Rick had his hand up, but just really quickly, because I do know that your book also touches on that a little bit as well. And I did see Lee's comment about how sometimes the government can be complicit in some of the drug conversation as well. I just wanted your take on the drug war and kind of what's going on, not just in Texas, but around the United States. And definitely it is a issue, whether it's fentanyl or whether it's more illegal type. Well, I mean, that's illegal as well, but some of the more known drugs like heroin and things along those lines. But I just wanted your take on the drug culture that we live in and how that plays a part in your book as well.
Yeah, well, I can smell the drug culture living outside of Denver here. So the problem I see, and I was part of it, and before I retired, even in the military, was we've been fighting and spending most of our money on the supply side, right? Fighting, trying to take old playbooks that didn't work and rework them, and somehow try and give different crops to growers in Colombia or in Mexico and different things like that. So we keep redoing the same thing over and over again and spending billions of dollars on the supply side, and we haven't addressed the root causes of the demand on the demand side, right? And whether it's homeless children or this idea that there's marijuana is free and legal, and I don't have a problem with anybody using it, but that doesn't sometimes translate based on individuals into other drugs and getting into a drug culture. So we had a couple programs back in the 80s and the 90s that tried to address, like DARE and other things like that, the demand side. They're still out there, but they're never talked about either, right? Because it's somehow we just got to cross the border, invade Mexico and stop the problem.
But along those same lines, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I definitely want to open up to Rick and Nick as well. And I know Lee's been putting some comments in the comment section. He may come on camera as well. But one of the things that I've oftentimes joked about, and I'm only partially joking, is that a lot of times, and you just kind of alluded to it, we go after people in certain neighborhoods, whether that's Compton in California, whether that's View Gardens, or a neighborhood that is like that is considered a very urban and kind of project area here in Durham, North Carolina. But as I jokingly say, I don't know that many dealers that are in those neighborhoods that actually own a plane. So that means that somebody's got to be bringing the items in. And of course, there was the famous case involving a Durham person who I think has passed and everything, but he was literally during the Vietnam War smuggling some of that stuff in using, I think, coffins and a number of other things, because he did have access in the military to planes and everything. But I sometimes wonder how much of the government and other people that have the greater resources must be complicit, as Lee just said earlier, and all along those lines, because many dealers that are out there, I don't know that they have access to a jet or some of the planes. I'm not saying that there aren't dealers that don't have access, but I'm just wondering about how much access there is, and if we're going after some of the wrong people. But I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, I know that Sinaloa and all the other serious Mexican cartels have different routes. We catch only a percentage of what comes across the border, right? We see with all of the illegal immigrants that they're not only getting charged to get coyote to cross the border, but then they're told, here, carry this square bale on your back, right? So even the illegal immigrants are being used as mules, right, as the saying goes, and stuff like that. And so, once stuff makes it across the border into the San Diego area, then moving it up through the states, up I-5, up the 8, all the different highways up into LA and different ways it can go, it's not a problem. Once it's in the states, it's got free movement, right? So,
yeah. Right. Two things. One, you mentioned you're married, and I got to say, having a spouse is a big help when you're dealing with hacking and phishing attacks, because getting a second set of eyes in there, my wife and I are always asking each other, does this look legit? And then, you know, we'll Google it, and like, you know, a phisher, a hacker, a phone scammer, they want to kind of take you into their world, drag you, get you all upset with a grandma scam, you know. And if you have a second person in the background going, hold on, wait a second, before you do anything, let's like think about it for a sec. That's thing one. Thing two is, so you were probably there in the White House at the beginning of the war on drugs, and 50 years on, you know, the war on drugs has complicated the issue of border security, because it's given the cartels a lot of power, and they've thoroughly compromised the Mexican government. And so is there any way to, you know, like help the Mexican government be less corrupt by doing things here in the U.S.?
Wow. Help the Mexican government be less corrupt. The cartels, you know, I focus a little bit more on Sinaloa than the others, but they're so, you know, it reminds me of the saying from the Matrix, right? It's like you're a virus, you know. They have so infiltrated financial institutions, the government, the political process writ large, that I'm not sure. I mean, when you look at the amount of drugs that are grown or produced in Mexico, right? And we know that Mexico is an importer of, because of legal pharmacies, even, you know, they're a big importer of precursors for fentanyl, things like that. It's such a large part of their GDP. I don't know how you unwind that. You can make it hard. You know, I think there are several options to make it hard on the leaders of these cartels to potentially change their behaviors. But, you know, invading Mexico, we're not doing that. They're too big of a trading partner. They're really a friend. They're just a compromised friend, right? And so that's a problem. To your point about phishing, Rick, I think that's really important, because my wife has been getting these phone calls. We live in what we call a security building. We're in a 4-story condo, and we've got a security door. You can come in the front into the quote lobby, and then you've got the silver frame, and dial the number, and then we answer and buzz you up kind of idea. And she's been getting these calls. I'm downstairs. Buzz me in. Or I'm downstairs. I'm the Amazon guy. I don't remember the code, you know, those kind of things. Now, she's really savvy. She was in banking before she got into real estate. And she knows these are scams, because she's gone downstairs and there's nobody there. We know that the Amazon person has a puck and a fob that lets that person in. So we have a security process with them so they can deliver packages inside the secure area. So things like that. So understanding your surrounding. Just this morning, I had another one. I get them all the time. You know, here's your Symantec antivirus receipt, you know, pay invoice, right? And it comes from some long sketchy email address, you know, that I recognize these kind of things, but it looks like a proper invoice. About 90% of the time, it looks pretty good, but it's like, I know I don't have Symantec on my computer, right? In this case, I'm talking to you from a Mac. I don't use Symantec, you know. So also understanding those kind of things, that was part of the play they used in the Beekeeper movie to get Felicia Rashad was playing this older lady to give up and talk to them. Oh, download this software so I can look over your shoulder. I'll help you install the right software, things like that.
Yeah, along those same lines and everything, just really quickly. And in that same line, I did see what Lee wrote down and everything. There was the incidents where some people were looking at the White House recently. It wasn't the first time, but you did work in the White House for a number of years and everything. So have you been surprised when you have seen incidents where there has been alleged drugs that have been placed in the White House? Because there was that incident earlier, well, latter part of last year, if I'm remembering correctly, and everything. And then, of course, there is notions, and you've got this book and everything about how Hollywood and even the entertainment landscape in general, including music, sometimes glamorizes the drug wars and the drug world and all along those lines. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about both of those. One, if it would have been easy to do that back in the 70s or the 80s when you were working there, and your thoughts when you first heard about that, as well as the glamorization thing.
Well, technically, back when I was there, it would have actually been easier to get a weapon in than it is today. There were in the metal detectors back in the 70s and the 80s, even into the 90s, there were holes in those radiation spheres that were looking for metal. And so you could tape a revolver to your thigh at a certain place and walk through. Sometimes they get you, sometimes they wouldn't. The technology is so much better now, right? And so, but even unless you walk into a pressurized room where they can puff air in and then sniff it, they would more than likely be looking for bomb making materials and signatures that look like that than they would for cocaine, fentanyl, or something else to puff. So that whoever did that was bold, stupid. I'll let you put your spin on it, right? Because it would have been, of course, a federal offense to bring that into government space and stuff. Maybe federal, but certainly local DC. And the technology, it's not set to, the technology around the White House is not set to stop that. There's actually inside the White House. I came back from a trip one time in Bangladesh, and I was in a bad way. And so I went and saw the president's doctor, and he prescribed me pills and things. So there's a complete pharmacy and medical unit within the White House grounds. So would you want to stop that? Would you want to spend your time looking for that, or for things that are more dangerous, right? Now, if that had turned out to be anthrax, that would have been a miss, that white powder. But the fact that it was, in theory, cocaine was interesting, but not something I would have set my finger.
So given the dates, you must have started out under Nixon and then into Ford and maybe Carter. And, Nixon had a reputation for doing some crimes, and Ford was made fun of for being stupid. And these days, the two major candidates, each side accuses the other side of losing it with dementia. And do you see any parallels, like working around these actual people and these things that accusations that defamed them versus the reality of what working with them was like?
Yeah, so I got there. My sponsor, as I drove in for the first time, he drove me into DC for the first time, said, "You see that building?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know what that is? And I think, is that the Watergate? He's like, "Yeah, don't go there." It was a week. I got there a week before Nixon resigned, and so Ford was getting on in age, and so he stumbled. When I skied with him in Vail, he slipped and fell down. He didn't crash and burn, cartwheel. He didn't do an Evel Knievel, but he fell down, and so he was getting older. But the people I saw were sharp. Whether or not they were exactly knowledgeable about a certain subject was a different story. I was there, let's say, a week before Nixon resigned till Reagan was elected. And I saw people who were smart, on point, really well-read. Ford's chief of staff was Dick Cheney at the time, right? And so there was a lot of smart people running around, which seemed to be a little bit different than like the Clinton era, where there was a lot of kids running around who thought they were important as staffers and made my friends crazy, because of their self-importance. So at that level, there's not a lot of this idea that we see now that we've run out of candidates, or people who, that's the part that bothers me, is it seems like we've run out of candidates who want to run for the office and have that energy and power to do that, that are young enough, in their 50s, early 60s, that they're still going to have the mental capacity, because it's the tempo and the intensity is often at a level people I don't think would understand. Even on a daily basis, there's a lot that goes on in and around the White House, the VP's office, all the time, right? And I think you do need, number one, you need to have a top shelf tier 1 staff, right? Because you can't be an expert on everything. You might be good on the economy, or like Nixon, you might be great in foreign policy or doing those kind of things, but you can never cover it all. And so that's what I look for. Is like, also, I want to know the candidate, what they think, but I also want to understand who's he bringing in into the potential administration, and what are their experiences, and what do they bring to the table. So.
And along those same lines, I was just wondering your thoughts, Steve, because we've also got Sasha here, and there are a number of wars, including one, because he does a show every, it's done on Tuesday and Fridays. It's about the Ukraine-Russia war and how that's been going, as with that Ukrainian brave resistance and all along those lines. And he's also been talking on this show quite a bit about what's going on with Israel and Palestine. So I just wanted your take as one that was there in the White House as to the foreign policy, and whether you think that either of these two candidates have got enough proxy or enough guts to be able to handle what they will probably be handling at the end of the year, because the Ukrainian war has been going on, I think, roughly now about 3 years or something along those lines. And now the Israel war is going on, it's 6 months and all in that space. So I just wanted your take as one that has worked with people like Nixon and Kissinger and others, and seen how people have to handle these foreign situations. And you heard me mention a number of them, like El Salvador and even Myanmar, that people will be dealing with if they either come back to the office in the case of Trump, or if they stay in the office in the case of Biden. But I'm just wondering your thoughts about that and all along those lines.
Yeah, I'm not a real fan of Blinken. Mm-hmm. He goes around and tries to create consensus. I don't think he operates from a place of power that can help people see alternatives. I'm not sure who. I know some of the folks who were in the Trump administration. Good friend of mine, AJ Tata, was on the defense side. He's a good friend. I think there's a different view. One is the Biden camp's got this, like, let's kumbaya, let's have this big world view, and we'll all work together, and everybody will rise everybody up. We'll follow the tide as we make the whole world a better place to be, and sort of that kind of unfortunately fairy tale kind of view, where Trump and sometimes the USA First can be a little bit the other way. So it's once again sort of like the political parties. It's like they're split out here, sort of on the edges, versus a more centralist concept of how you might take this government, this economic engine that we have, and help the rest of the world where they want to be helped, right? Our foreign policy, that's brought us into different wars over time and things like that, it's been pretty D-level for me. It hasn't been great. There's a few times we've done things right, but they're overshadowed by the many times we've done things from a USA-only mindset that has affected the rest of the world in not so good ways.
Yeah. Sasha, I don't know if you've got any thoughts, any questions and everything, but like I said, and Steve, if you want to share more about the nature of the book, I'm sure folks will be interested. And of course, Nick's here, one of the founders of our network as well. And one of the things he talks about quite a bit is how a lot of things that should be addressed by the media aren't addressed by the media, including some of the things that we've been talking about today. And he even talks about the budget and a number of other things that are not covered at all. And we've also got Jatovia with us as well. But I just wanted your thoughts about some of these things that are not covered, including things that were covered when you were in the office. Because, like I said, I do remember that was the age, because I am a journalism major from Marquette and have definitely studied the field of Walter Cronkite, who is not above talking about all kinds of issues and all kinds of stories. Whereas I don't know that we have that kind of reporting going on now, because we got a lot of people that are having their own agendas, for lack of a better term.
I believe that American administration, no, I'm talking about this present administration and future administrations, they have to realize that United States is not loved country in the world. It's never will be a loved country. It has to be feared country. Only fear will keep U.S. policy intact. And I'm not talking about just a military strength of the United States. I'm talking about financial strength, because there's a country like BRICS who are trying undermine US dollar. And if they will succeed, and they already have 16 more countries who are supporting getting away from US dollars or so on, and all US debt, $34 trillion is in US dollars. So if US dollars will be weakened substantially, never mind collapsing, then US basically becoming insolvent country. So the military might of America is not just to prove that their military might is greater than other countries, is just to defend interests of all Americans. And if that's the case, I recommend that America has to figure out how to get the mandatory military service for all young people 18 years and older. Mandatory for everybody, doesn't matter their financial status or political status or anything. They all have to serve, and only after that they can continue their education or working careers or so on. So this is absolutely must for the United States. And the administration is not projecting power at all. Look at this. The Pentagon said they can no longer service the arms, weapons that they sent to Ukraine. And you know why? Because Pentagon has no money. So what kind of a message is being sent to America and its enemies? Everybody hates America, and when there is such a weakness as inability to help its allies, its partners. Now, if you're taking help to Ukraine, United States number 33, if you're taking per capita help of all countries that are helping to Ukraine, America is number 33 in the list. Shame on you.
I actually have to agree with Sasha on that point. This is a real problem that the United States doesn't want to face, is the debt, the $34 trillion in debt. It gives us a lot less mobility to deal internationally, because you do have to be loved and feared. And you're not loved if you're broke, and you're not feared if you're broke. And that's a big problem. And of course, our politicians, I don't see too many that have financial backgrounds. So 34 trillion to them, you might as well talk about there's a balloon in the sky. And they spend money in Washington on things they shouldn't.
The governor of sorry, I'm late today, guys. The governor of Pritzker was a venture capitalist, so he has a finance. I just had a call with him a couple of days ago with Congressman Krishnamurti, but there aren't that many that have financial experience. And, I think that the debt, today I was going to just update us on, the Fed not reducing interest rates, which I think is going to hurt Biden now. In terms of the economy not being stimulated for more growth, will that slow things down? And then, of course, the debt doesn't help that. Sasha probably is, well, I think it's good that the EU finally giving the 50 billion euros to Ukraine to appease, Hungary was obstructing a lot of support there. So that's something interesting. And of course, Israel, Netanyahu not changing his tune, wanting to close down refugee camps. So it doesn't look like the situation in the Middle East is getting any better. So, but yeah, I think going back to debt, I think it's a significant problem. And but I think as long as the U.S. keeps doing it, it doesn't seem to hurt them. They can always put more money So, I mean, you know,
Well, the problem
You
with printing
brought
money
up
is it creates inflation. I mean,
Right.
so the thing is, they've already demonstrated
Yeah.
printing money is not a solution. It creates inflation. What they have to do is spend money on what government needs to spend money on, which is not a $1 million going to Carnegie Hall, which I just came back from in New York City. It's a beautiful facility. You can spend money on it, and they did. It's not spending billions on building electronics for Tesla. It's not spending billions to let Elon Musk fly to the sky. So what happens is Washington, D.C. has a spending problem, and it's really simple to figure it out. They donate to the lobbyist. I was up in your ways, Steve. They donate to the lobbyist. We were the 12th largest PAC in the country. Then you get an invite to go meet with the senator, the U.S. senator.
yeah,
Then you talk about your situation, and then things miraculously work for you. They have basically a de facto corrupt government, and it works like that. But the people who are listening to this program, the people that are listening to major media, don't have a clue. That this is what's going on every day in Washington, D.C. So all of a sudden you see charging stations being paid for, CHIPS Acts being paid for, whatever greatest scam that's out there for a billionaire to make more money is being paid for, and we're going more in debt for that.
You brought up people in Congress not knowing stuff. If you want to be a CPA, a doctor, a teacher, a lawyer, you have to do continuing ed. Every year you have to take courses to make sure you're up to date. There's a guy in Congress who sent himself back to college to learn AI because he thought it was important that somebody in Congress knew how that worked. But it would be great if like Chuck Grassley, 87 years old, if somebody could make Chuck Grassley sit down and take some classes and learn some stuff, and all these people in there who may not know what they should know.
Just along those lines, I'd love to hear Steve's responses to some of these things that y'all have said, and definitely Nick may want to have some other comments as well, and Sasha, but just some of your thoughts, and I'm sure Jacoby's got some questions for you as well and everything, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, Steve.
Sure. Well, to Sasha's point, number one, I think there should be mandatory service for everybody. I extend it out a little bit. I think it could be service 2 years at the Red Cross. I think it could be service to the national parks. Do something that is beyond yourself and helps the nation. Not everybody. In my case, I expanded out beyond just military.
Steve, I'm sorry, Red Cross is more problematic because it's run by Hamas, and I don't think it would be a wise and practical for U.S. To try to meddle and do anything with the Red Cross at all.
Okay, and that's probably a good point there, Sasha. But you know what I mean. Those kind of NG, help be part of an NGO or something that's approved. The other part of that is that compulsive service. I think as was pointed out, it's like less than 1% of the people join the military, and just now because the recruiting's so bad, the Navy, I believe it's the Navy, has dropped the requirement for a GED or a high school diploma. So the military's in a hurt right now. And I remember, because I got in just as the last of the draftees were getting let go. And we had people that were just, I started off in electronics. We had people that were just short of a double E. And we had smart people. They spent their 2 years. They went back and did what they did. But the service in the nation was better for having that draft. Not that I wished anybody, had to go to Vietnam and that kind of thing. So go ahead.
We've got a surplus of productivity in the country. Productivity's increased tenfold since World War II. We could certainly come up with, we have enough available labor. I know there's a job shortage right now, but it's an employee shortage right now, but that's because people have to work multiple crappy jobs. But it's certainly feasible for the U.S. to come up with a national service program where people in their late teens, right out of high school into their 20s or even older, spend 18 months doing some kind of public service. We've had programs like that during the Depression. The WPA wasn't mandatory, but it helped a lot of Americans. And of course, our parents, our grandparents went through the draft, at least the male members of the family. And, you know, it wasn't the worst thing for the country.
Yeah, Conservation Corps, those kind of things. Exactly.
Yeah, but are those innovative ideas even being mentioned in Congress? In other words, I don't see anybody in the leaders of our country, the people who are running for office. I don't see anything innovative coming from them. Now,
Well,
Steve Rao knows more because he spends a lot of time with the president of the United States and the vice president of the United States. So you've had some private conversations with him, Steve. So maybe you have some insights on what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Well, I mean, my insights are actually professionally. I work for a very connected lobbyist who is on the Biden Victory Fund, and so I get to, you know, attend a lot of events and everything. But I have a personal connection to the president through some mutual friends that we have in Delaware, where I spent. I won 2 state high school tennis championships. So, you know, I think my conversations with the Bidens have actually. 2 things. One, the president's a lot healthier than the TV projects him to be mentally and everything physically. He's doing a better job with the messaging, but like recently I attended the Joe Biden event. I met her for a few minutes and I felt like her messaging was just completely off. I mean, you know, she was talking about their first date and, you know, what he wore. And it just was like, I didn't understand why I was even there. And a lot of people walked out of the meeting going, this just didn't make sense at all. So I think the White House communications is quite messed up. I think that the messaging, I mean, the Kamala Harris event was so disorganized. I mean, you know, people were waiting there for hours. When they finally got in to get a picture, they were told, the people that were told they could go to the town hall had driven across the state. They said, well, it's not a public event. And then they blocked the exit. So they were stuck there till 5 o'clock that evening. I mean, it was like, and I ended up getting out early. So anyway, to answer your question, I just feel extreme disorganization and dysfunction. And I think a very disorganized White House. And I think that they're not communicating on the same page. And I do believe that's why they may lose this election.
Why is it so crappy? Biden's been in politics for 50 years. Why doesn't he know better? Or is he so busy doing the job of the...
Yeah, I think when you become the president, a lot of times it's, you know, not you, it's the people that you have around you. And I just think they brought in a lot of people and he may not know, right? I mean, yeah, he has the experience for sure. I'm not saying it's not winnable, but what has to happen is they need to get the first lady and the president and the State Department, everybody on the same page with messaging on the economy, on he did a good job in Raleigh talking about the broadband investments, the infrastructure, $31 billion of investment coming into North Carolina, unemployment under about 3%, 5.5% when Trump was in the White House, many companies expanding where Mark Lee and I live and Jacoby live. But that message isn't coming across to all the American people, to independents, to Republicans. And so Trump can come in there and go, look, the border's a mess. I told you so. Prices are high. I told you so. Rates aren't coming down. Everything's a mess. I told you so. And people go, yeah, you know, we're not really better off than we were 4 years ago. And remember when Ronald Reagan asked Jimmy Carter that question on the stage? Well, that's the question really, right, at the end of the day. And it's going to come down to 4 states in the United States. It's not going to be every state in the United States. It's going to come down to Michigan, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Florida, Texas, maybe a few others. And, Florida and Texas probably go Trump. And it's going to come down to 3 states. I mean, I think this thing's going to come down to a couple hundred electoral votes.
Yeah, hold on one second, Steve. I think Toby had a question. I definitely wanted to hear Steve's thoughts as well, because Steve was our special guest, and he's definitely had some associations with some of the people that know Trump and everything along those lines. But Toby, you had a question as well.
Oh, well, I was just gonna, point out what Steve is talking about. What Rao is talking about is right. It's about messaging, and that's the funny part. The irony of the whole situation. When even Steve's question. Because of the messaging, we forget 4 years ago, the country was shut down. 4 years ago, even if it was last year, there was a spike at the border. there were riots in the streets. Well, there were protests in the streets. Trump was utilizing the National Guard to clear out people in front of the White House so he could walk over and take a photo op in front of a church. That was 4 years ago. So when we talk about are we better off from 4 years ago, the true answer is yes. But due to the messaging and the way that things will get rolled out, just how Nick comes on and says the national debt, the national debt, the national debt. Well, 25% of it was put on by Donald Trump. On top of that, in the past last year's House and this year's House, the way it seems, will be the least effective House ever. And we're not talking about the thing Steve talked about the immigration being the problem, and that's what they're going to hammer on. Yeah, it's going to be a problem because the House GOP is blocking the funds to the border. The GOP state governor is blocking the federal government from doing their job at the border and actually trying to initiate an actual battle between the federal government and the federal workers, armed guards, and the state armed guards. So there's a lot of things that we aren't honest about, even the economy and everything else. The CHIPS Act. Steve Rao just talked about the good that it's done in North Carolina and all the areas that it's working on, but yet Nick came on and talked about the national debt and all the CHIPS Act.
Think about. I'll end with this. I got to leave in a minute, but real quickly, and then I want everyone to. What I'm trying to do on the show, and I'm sorry I've been coming in late, is just to give everyone a minute to wrap up, so we get everyone a chance to give in there. But my 10 cents before I go to Sasha, then we'll go to Rick, and then I want Steve, our guest, to close out. And Steve, I'm sorry I'm late. But the bottom line is this. When you think about it, 882 North Carolinians now have broadband, and they're adding another 16,000 households. Millions and millions of dollars of investment, thousands of jobs. That's a good thing, but it's not being conveyed out to the American people. So I think that's the challenge the president has: is does the average American care? I went on a Lyft drive. I don't know if it's any bad indication for the president. I didn't have a car. Every Lyft driver was Mexican that I had. Every single one of them said they're voting for Trump. Okay, that's a problem for the president, right? But everyone thinks, well, we're the party of minorities. Anyway, we'll come back to that. I'll be gone tomorrow. But let's go, Sasha. Your 20, whatever. Close out. Then I want to go to Rick, and then we're going to close out with Steve, our guest.
The latest figures actually show that Biden now has 6% advantage over Trump if election would be held today. Number two, there are approximately $6 trillion are sitting in money market accounts. And once interest rates will start dropping, now it's not going to happen in March most likely, but in May, there is almost 100% certainty that they will start lowering interest rates. And a lot of this money, I'm talking about this $6 trillion US dollars, will move into the markets. Market will skyrocket, although it's even now, it's not doing so badly. Number three, Biden is not scared of Donald Trump being elected as a nominee because he will obviously defeat him. The real danger is Nikki Haley. She would defeat Biden 6, maybe even 8%. That's her advantage if election would be held today. But most likely Trump will win the nomination. By the time that he will win the nomination, there will be, give or take, probably $600 million in judgments against him. I'm talking about civil trials. Now, when it comes to criminal trials, I don't understand who in his right mind, I'm talking about independents, will vote for quasi-criminal destitute. It just puzzles me. I live in Canada, and we would never had a person with multiple charges, criminal, and
Hold on a second, Sasha, because Steve definitely said that he said he had friends that actually worked for Trump, so he might have some answers to that and all along those lines. So
Guys,
Steve,
we're at a minute, so let's Steve close out because we have to leave. We're on the hour. Steve, Rick, real quickly, and then Steve. We got one
All
minute.
right, so we talked about national service, but we got a problem. The smartphone in everybody's hand is a selfishness engine that exalts the individual, that makes it really tough for us to come together as a nation the way we did during World War II and the Depression. And it's a huge problem in a lot of ways, and I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
Steve,
Just really quickly, Jacoby and Nick, and then Steve to close out. We still got those two as well. Fast. Jacoby? Jacoby might have bounced off, but
Yeah, Steve, let's close out. Steve, or Nick, and then we got to go.
I'll defer my
Steve.
time to Steve. Council.
Thank you, Nick. Real quick, I'll say I'm 100% aligned with you guys about messaging. Even in the corporate world, you don't win unless your messaging is aligned. The second thing is, how do you translate all that goodness in North Carolina and make people feel that that is possible in the other states? You know, I hear that as well. That's great in North Carolina. What's that got to do with me in Colorado? Right. And then thirdly, I think that people are setting aside this idea that you might have done some things wrong, but you can still govern the U.S. and be strong in the world. And I've never seen that before, right? As Sasha said. So it's a very interesting time. I'm going to continue to watch and see what you guys bring here through the World Edition. And I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
And I'll end with this. I've come up with my own dream ticket for the presidency just based on strong leadership, and that's actually Chambers Mansion, both West Virginians and friends of mine. A few weeks ago, I had a call with John Chambers. I'm bringing him to the Raleigh area in May for an event. And, it's amazing. He wrote a book called Lesson for Leadership in a Startup World, and it's all about having a playbook, a set of plays. And this is the man who took a company from 70 million to 47 billion and acquired 180 companies, saw Cisco oversee 8 downturns, knows how to build teams, knows about the new economy, is well respected around the world, including Modi, Macron, all of these people, and Joe Manchin, from West Virginia. So I joked with John, wouldn't that be a hell of a ticket?
Manchin said that he's thinking about it, and along with thinking about it as a third-party candidate. Just really quickly before we walk out the door and everything, Steve, if you would tell people once again how you can be reached and how you can be found and any ways that you want to be known. And I would also love to invite you, and I can send you the StreamYard link. We do every Tuesday and Thursday our World Politics show, and I would love to have you come back on World Edition whenever you're available. And if you like World Politics this evening, I'd love to see you on that as well. But I know you're a busy man, but I'll definitely send you the link if you're available. But if you're tell folks how you can be contacted.
Yeah. So you can reach me at stevestrattonusa.com. I'm sorry, StevenStrattonUSA.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. But that's Steven, STEVEN, StrattonUSA.com. And you can reach me there. I love this kind of conversation. I appreciate, once again, you having me on. And I look forward to joining in the conversation in the future.
Okay, definitely. And I'll send you the invitation for this evening's World Politics. And if you can jump on, do. If you can't, I'll also send it to you for the one that we do on Tuesday, and maybe even add you into our regular rotation for popping in on this show. I'll say, now that I've got the email, I'll send it in whenever you're available. Try to pop in, because we love getting different perspectives and all along those lines. And like I said, you've got some contacts that we don't have, including people currently tied to the White House and Washington, and those that were there in the past. So I know you'll bring a interesting perspective. So right now we're going to get on out of here, but hopefully we'll see you at 5, possibly this evening.
Take care.
Bye-bye.